in the crushing silence of the secret annex, a place that was really defined by fear and being trapped, this totally unexpected story of human connection started to unfold. So today we're going to dive into the fragile first love between Anne Frank and Peter Van Pels, a relationship that was really a spark of life in the absolute darkest of times. But here's the thing, their story did not start with romance, not even close. Anne's first impression of Peter was, well, to put it mildly, it wasn't great. In her diary, she actually described him as a lump. I mean, that's a pretty blunt, almost brutal thing to say about a boy she was trapped with, and it just perfectly sets the stage for how much was about to change. So, right from the start, what you see is this huge clash of personalities. You've got two teenagers forced into this impossibly tiny space under the most stressful circumstances you can even imagine. Let's take a look at how Anne saw Peter right at the beginning. From Anne's point of view, and she was so vibrant and outspoken, Peter was basically her polar opposite. He was awkward, deeply shy. He was this boy who honestly seemed to prefer the company of his cat, Mushi, to any of the people around him. He barely said a word, and for someone like Anne, who was so full of dreams, he just seemed to lack any kind of inner fire or spark. To her, he just wasn't even on the radar as anything more than like a piece of the furniture. He was dull, uninterested, almost invisible. Just this quiet shadow in the corner of their shared prison. Definitely not a potential friend, and for sure not a love interest. But then, something started to change. And this is where the story gets really, really interesting. It wasn't actually Peter who changed. Not at first, anyway. It was Anne. Something deep inside her began to shift. The endless passage of time and hiding kind of forced this psychological evolution on her. As a teenager trapped without any friends her age or any real privacy, Anne just became more introspective, more thoughtful. The confinement that was stifling her freedom was also, strangely, deepening her ability to feel empathy, pushing her to look beyond the surface of the people she was stuck with. And this comparison, wow, it just shows you how huge that shift was. Where she once saw a dull and uninterested boy, she started to see someone who was just lonely and sad. What she thought was indifference, she realized was actually fear. The boy who was once basically invisible to her was suddenly revealed as this gentle, thoughtful person who was just hiding underneath all his anxiety. And this new understanding, it found a home. It found a place to grow. And that place was the attic. It became their own private world, a little sanctuary away from the prying eyes and the constant tension of everyone else living below. Now, this didn't happen overnight. Their connection was built really slowly. Their conversations, they just started as soft whispers, talking about books, their families, and the dreams they had for a future they weren't even sure they were going to get. You have to understand, in the suffocating quiet and constant tension of the annex, every tiny moment of connection was magnified. A shared glance, a quiet laugh, a whispered secret, these little things took on this enormous weight and intimacy. And so, Peter completely transformed in her eyes. He became the one person she could actually confide in. He listened without judging her, which was so rare and precious in that tense environment. He offered this steady, safe presence, a kind of calm anchor in the storm of her own teenage emotions and her often tricky family relationships. All of this growing emotional bond, well, it eventually led to a moment that felt both totally surprising and somehow completely inevitable. A moment of really fragile intimacy, their first kiss. The way Anne describes it in her diary is so telling. This wasn't some big, passionate movie moment kiss. No, it was timid, it was fragile, and it was just deeply, deeply human. A moment of tenderness and normalcy that they stole right from the darkness of the war. And almost immediately, Anne's sharp, analytical mind kicks right in. She starts questioning herself, and through her diary, she's really questioning us. Was this feeling real love? Or was it just a desperate reaction to being so profoundly lonely? Or maybe it was just the annex itself, this artificial pressure cooker creating closeness out of pure necessity. But honestly, regardless of the answer to those questions, what this relationship meant for Anne was just undeniable. It became an absolutely critical part of her psychological survival while she was in hiding. When you boil it all down, their connection gave her hope. It gave her a desperately needed emotional outlet in a world that demanded total silence. It made her feel seen and actually understood. And maybe most importantly, in a place where they were all just trying to survive from one day to the next, it gave her a way to feel truly, fully alive. This quote really just brings it all home, doesn't it? And herself, with all her introspection, she seemed to get the distinction perfectly. Peter wasn't her one great, epic love story, but he was her first. And for a teenage girl who was stripped of her friends, her freedom, and her future, having that first brush with love, with intimacy, with being truly seen by another person, well, that meant everything. It was a lifeline. Their story, born from being trapped and surrounded by fear, it leaves us all with a pretty universal question. How much do our own circumstances, our own annexes, whether they're big or small, shape who we connect with and who we ultimately come to love?